Hello everyone, my name is Akash Ganesh and today we're going to be talking about my Pi project for cnit 176. When I first looked at the project and it said that my project needed to be something that I could incorporate into my life and would be beneficial, I first went down the path of tethering my camera to my Pi so that I could have a similar system to what I see professional photographers have in their studio, where they shoot a model and then the image appears in the monitor in the next second. But as I was going through this and trying to find a solution to link my camera, an Nikon D51, to my Pi so that I could improve my workflow and thus my efficiency, I realized that cameras have specialized security checks built into their system to avoid this very sort of thing, so that users would then have to go and buy the manufacturer's proprietary software or system in order to be able to use this tethering feature. Thus, I went a different route and realized that my dorm room was kind of bland in the media realm. I have a desktop and a laptop and this camera, but I don't really have a dedicated source for media consumption. I don't have a media hub. Thus, it was my goal with this project to create a media hub that can play movies and TV shows, something that can work as a server and also allow me to play a couple games when I needed to. And in order to meet these three needs of my project, I decided to install Kodi for the media consumption needs. I decided to install a Plex server so that I can store all my movies in one location on the Pi, and then access it through all my other devices that are enabled to use the network. And then for the game side of things, I decided to install Recalbox, which is an emulator for old gaming devices like the NES, all the Game Boys, the PSP systems, and then older systems like the Commodore and Atari, things that no one's even heard of nowadays. But those were the three major softwares that I decided to install into my Pi in order to create this media hub. So now that I've kind of told you what I wanted to do and where I went with it, let's look at how it actually affects and builds upon the architecture of the Pi itself. This project affects the Pi in three separate ways. For the first solution, the Kodi, the program doesn't really require much in terms of the architecture itself. It's just a simple process of installing the software and then giving it root access in order to be able to follow all the tasks. But the second program needed more changes to the system. Due to running a server, there's the fact that I needed to be able to use the I/O interface in order to actually be able to link my large files to the Pi, due to the fact that the SD card has limited storage capabilities, and I had very large files such as movies that I wanted to be able to use for the server. Then there was the aspect of making modifications to the Wi-Fi signal that was thrown out by the device due to the need of a static IP address so that the Plex servers can connect to my Pi at any time to create the bridge between the Pi and my other devices such as my laptop and my phone. And due to how big the files typically are and how many simultaneous tasks needed to take place, I found that it could get pretty taxing on the Pi, causing it to not function the way it should, and sometimes even crashing because of the load on the Broadcom chip. And the third part of the project is the emulator from Recalbox, which functions under the same premises as Kodi, but it does change the way that the Pi interacts with the I/O inputs due to the fact that Recalbox works off of a controller basis and not a keyboard system and such. For the most part, it was just a simple skin that had emulators installed on it, but it did change the way that all the I/O inputs were being read and thrown out. Now on to the procedures. We'll go down the same order that we did for the previous two: Kodi, Plex, and then Recalbox. In order to install Kodi onto the Pi, I simply had to go into the Pi repository and add another repository or a repo called Pippleware, which allowed me to download the program without having to take the SD card out of my Pi and plug it into my laptop. Next, I had to access the keys to the repositories and add another key so that the new repository could be added and it could access the files from Kodi so that I could install the program itself. And then there was an update that I performed in order to get all the new files required, and after that point it was just simply making the repository install Kodi for me. For the Plex, I enabled the HTTPS transport package for it and then enabled a crypto key to access the Plex servers. And then I installed the repository for Plex by using the key and the transport package that I had just enabled. And once that was done, I just needed to get my current IP and set a static IP address so that the server can always reach the device when I needed to. And then after that, it just came down to adding new files to my server using a USB input. And last but not least, the Recalbox emulator. In order to install this process, it was fairly simple. All I had to do was write the OS onto the SD card that I was using for my Pi using my laptop, and then once it was booted, all I had to do was give it root access so that I could run in the background and do all the tasks that I need to do. So it was probably the simplest of the three because all I had to do was plug it into my laptop and install the OS onto the card itself and just plug it in. Now let's take a look at what I was actually able to do with it once I did this process. The first solution that we have here is Kodi. Now with Kodi, what I can do is I can browse through movies, TV shows, music videos, TV, radio, pictures, my videos, and the weather. Unfortunately, I don't have anything set up as of now, but when I do, I can go through the movies here, and in a second I'll just pop a picture of what it would look like if the section was full. And what I can basically do is I can select whatever movie I want and I can watch it. At the moment, all I have added on here is ABC Family, CNN, YouTube, and a ROM launcher for my other install that I did. So in this case with CNN, what I can do is now with this I can open it up, choose which one of these I want, and then I can go and watch whatever videos are in there. Same with ABC and the same with YouTube. I can use this like a YouTube launcher. And at the moment I don't have much loaded on here, but when I do, I can watch movies and TV shows and music. I can get all the music that I need just from right here, and I won't have to worry about going to different sources or using my laptop to find various websites where I can access those things. And when I get out of Kodi, I have the option to either reboot the system, power off system, or have a shutdown timer in order to use the other things, because I'm using an OS sort of system to install Kodi on here. So when I want to go to my next solution, which is the Recalbox, I simply reboot the system.
Select Recalbox.
And Recalbox boots up. Now what Recalbox does is basically it has all these emulators for old school games, and at the moment there's only like 5 or 6 on here, but the more games that I add, the more emulators will show up on the screen, and all I have to do for that is add the ROM files of the games to the folder where Recalbox is currently running, and it'll just scan it, and then it'll know exactly what emulator to boot up on the screen so that I can play the games. So for example, if I want to play a Super Nintendo game at the moment, I can select Super Nintendo, and the only game that Recalbox comes with for Super Nintendo is Kong, I guess. And if I wanted to instead go to Doom, there's the Doom game. I have a PC Engine at the moment which runs these 2 games. I have the Nintendo Entertainment System with the oldest form of 2048 ever. I have the Sega Master System and Game Boy Advance running at the moment. And basically what this does is, at the moment, I just an emulator for old games, but in the future I want to also install the capabilities on here for me to live stream games from my desktop, so that I can just play the games on the monitor with my keyboard that I have with the Pi. Instead of having to sit at the desk and play it that way, I can just sit on my futon and use this monitor and the Pi as my system instead. And the last part of my project was to create a media server that can run off the Raspberry Pi. And at the moment, since I don't have a USB attached to it, all I have are a couple songs that are running off of it. And as you can see, it says Pi up here. And I just downloaded the first songs that were on my laptop, which happened to be the soundtrack here. But as you can see, those songs aren't actually on my phone, as there are no songs on my phone. So it's running directly off the Pi, but it's not stored on my phone. So there's my media server that's working off the Pi. The Pi crashed several times as I tried to use it, and I had to reset and reinstall Raspbian multiple times, and there were a lot of just trial and errors of tweaks that I had to perform in order to get the solutions to work the way that I wanted to, but even then there were some issues that persisted. For example, in Kodi, I had to find the right repository due to the fact that Purdue's internet blocks most places that the software would typically pull files from. And so trying to find the right repository where all the files could properly be pulled onto the device was a hard task that I had to kind of get around. And in Plex, I had a lot of issues with the Pi just completely shutting down due to the load that it was putting on it at first, until I streamlined the way that it performed and called all the separate files that it needed to, but even then the Purdue internet caused a lot of issues for me. Recallbox was the only solution that didn't give me a lot of troubleshooting issues, other than actually figuring out what button was used for what, since everything was remapped. So the biggest issue I had here was just the fact that my Pi just kept crashing or turning off, and then I had to keep resetting it and reinstalling Raspbian every single time for like a week before I was able to finally get everything to work properly. After completing the project, I now realize how much actually goes into installing something and troubleshooting it, since Windows really doesn't require the user to do a lot, and Macs even less so. And I also learned that if I were to do this again, I should probably set up an access point first, and then go into setting everything else up, because the Purdue internet just came in the way of my install so many times, causing the code to like cancel halfway due to not being able to access something, and then I would have to start all over again and try to find a different way to get my Pi to access those files, and then probably be thwarted by the Purdue internet again. So it was just a tedious process of doing that over and over again. So I'd probably set up an access point first, so that I could then go into setting up the actual programs that I needed to. But most importantly, I just learned where everything is on the Pi and how to access the various levels of the Pi to make it perform the tasks that I wanted it to. So that concludes this video about my Media Hub project, and I hope that I didn't put you to sleep halfway through, but yeah, that's how I made my Media Hub for cnit 176. Bye. New York!